There is a conversation happening in the minds of men all around you right now, today, that almost none of them will ever say out loud. It happens when a man watches a woman walk into a room with her shoulders back and her chin lifted, not performing confidence, but simply living inside it. It happens when a man sits across from a woman at dinner and realizes, somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, that she is not waiting for his approval. It is not a conversation he planned to have with himself. It is not something he rehearsed. It rises up from somewhere deep and wordless, some chamber in his mind that he rarely opens in polite company, and what it says surprises him every single time. He thinks, she is different. He thinks, she is something I do not fully understand. He thinks, I want to be closer to whatever she has, and I am not sure I deserve to be. These are the thoughts men carry about older women. The real ones, the unfiltered ones. The ones that never make it into casual conversation because men are not given a language for them, and because, frankly, admitting them out loud feels far too vulnerable for most men to risk. But today, we are going to open that conversation. We are going to walk through the rooms of the male mind, turn on every light, and look at what is actually in there. Not what men perform. Not what men say at bars or in the company of their friends. Not the rehearsed lines and the cultural scripts. The real thing. The raw thing. The thoughts men have about older women that they guard like the most private parts of themselves. This is for every woman who has ever wondered what he was actually thinking. This is for every woman who has ever sat across from a man and sensed something beneath his surface that he would not allow himself to speak. This is for every woman who has been told, directly or indirectly, that her age was something to apologize for, and who has never quite believed that the story ends there. Because it does not end there, not even close. Welcome back to the Heart Compass, the channel where we go beneath the surface of love, connection, relationships, and the human heart, because you deserve more than shallow answers to deep questions. If you are new here, I want you to feel completely at home. This channel exists for you. It exists for the woman who is done being told she should shrink herself. It exists for the woman who has lived enough life to know the difference between what people say and what they mean. It exists for the woman who is standing at a crossroads in her emotional life and who wants real insight, not platitudes. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to the Heart Compass right now. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. This community is growing every single day, and every new voice that joins us makes this space richer and more powerful for everyone. If you have been with us for a while, welcome home. You already know that we do not do surface level here. We go deep, we go honest, and we go all the way. For today's video, I want to ask you to do something before we even begin. I want you to open your heart. I want you to set aside, just for the next hour or so, every message you have ever received about being too old, too much, too experienced, or past your prime. I want you to set aside the cultural noise. I want you to create a quiet space inside yourself. And I want you to receive what we are about to explore with openness. Because what I am going to share with you today may challenge some deeply held beliefs, not just the beliefs that others have planted in you, but beliefs you may have planted in yourself. Today's topic is this: how men think about older women but never say out loud. And I want you to know before we go a single word further, what men actually think in their private and unguarded moments is far more layered, far more admiring, and far more complex than anything the culture has led you to believe. Before we dive in, let me ask you to do 3 things that mean the world to this channel. First, if you find value in what we share here, please give this video a like. It takes 2 seconds, and it helps more women find content that actually serves them. Second, leave a comment below. Tell me where you are in your life right now. Tell me what question brought you here today. Tell me what you want to understand. I read every single comment and I respond as much as I possibly can. Third, share this video with a woman in your life who needs to hear it. You know who she is. She is the friend, the sister, the mother, the colleague who has been dimming her light because she has been told that time is her enemy. Share this with her. And if you really want to support the work we do here at the Heart Compass, please consider showing your appreciation through Super Thanks. It is a small gesture that makes an enormous difference in our ability to keep creating content like this for you. You will find the Super Thanks button right below this video. Now, let us begin. Part 1. The silence that speaks. There is a particular kind of silence that happens when a man is in the presence of a woman he finds genuinely, profoundly compelling, and he cannot quite name why. This is a different silence from the one that happens when he finds a woman conventionally attractive. Conventional attraction is loud. Conventional attraction announces itself. It is the kind of response that men talk about freely, joke about with their friends, post about on the internet. It is surface level, and it knows it is surface level. And because it lives on the surface, it requires no particular bravery to admit. But there is another kind of attraction that is not loud at all. It is quiet. It is slow. It builds like a tide rather than crashing like a wave. And by the time a man notices it, he is already somewhere deep inside it with no clear memory of how he got there. This is, overwhelmingly, what men experience in the presence of older women who are fully themselves. And here is the first thing that men will almost never say out loud. They do not always understand it. The attraction does not fit neatly into the categories men have been given. It does not match the templates. It is not what they were told to look for. And so, when they find themselves feeling it, there is no ready-made language for it, no script for what to do next, and no cultural permission to say it plainly. So they go silent, or they deflect, or they say something clumsy and off-key that does not capture any of what they are actually experiencing. What they are actually experiencing in those quiet moments is something much closer to awe than to simple attraction. It is the feeling of standing in the presence of something real in a world full of performances. It is the feeling of being near a woman who has been through something, who has, as the old phrase goes, been tested, and who carries that experience not as damage, not as bitterness, but as depth. Men feel depth before they can articulate it. They walk toward it before they understand why, and then they go silent, because the language they have was not built for what they are feeling. This silence is not absence. This silence is something else entirely. And learning to recognize the difference, that is where everything begins. Part 2. What men admire that they cannot say. Let us start with something foundational. Let us talk about what men genuinely, privately, in the wordless chambers of their inner experience, find extraordinary about older women. Not what they perform, not what they would say at a party or in a text message trying to impress. The actual thing, the first and perhaps most powerful of these, is this. Men admire women who know who they are. This sounds simple. It is not simple. It is one of the rarest things in human experience. A person who has moved through the fires of life, through loss and disappointment and transformation and reinvention, and who has arrived at a genuine, settled, unperformed sense of self. Men who are honest with themselves, and this is a smaller group than we might like to think, will tell you that there is nothing on earth more attractive than a woman who does not need you to define her. Not because she is cold, not because she is closed, but because she is already full. She is already someone. She is not waiting for a man to make her real. This is what older women often carry, not all of them, and not automatically, but with increasing frequency as the years go by and the external noise begins to matter less. They have had enough experiences of building themselves up, tearing themselves down, and rebuilding again that they have stopped mistaking other people's opinions for their own. They have stopped editing themselves for rooms that do not deserve the original version. Men feel this the moment they walk into a woman's orbit. They may not have words for it. They may describe it as something vague. She just has this energy, or there's something about her I can't put my finger on, but what they are describing is a woman who knows herself, and that knowing is magnetic in a way that nothing else quite replicates. The second thing men privately admire about older women is their relationship with truth. Younger women, through no fault of their own, but simply through the nature of where they are in life, often speak in the language that they have learned gets the best results. They negotiate, they soften, they apologize for taking up space. They frame their truths in ways designed to minimize friction and maximize approval, because they are still learning that their approval of themselves is the only one that matters. Older women have, more often than not, made their peace with truth. They have learned that softening a hard truth does not make it less hard, it just delays the arrival. They have learned that saying what they actually mean is not unkind, it is respectful. They have learned that a woman who speaks plainly is not a woman to fear. She is a woman to trust. Men, and I mean men who are mature enough to be honest with themselves, are deeply drawn to women they can trust. And trust, at its most fundamental level, is built on the certainty that the person in front of you is showing you something real, not curated, not managed, real. Older women, by and large, have stopped performing. And in a world full of performances, the woman who has stepped off the stage is the most interesting person in the room. The third thing, and this one is very rarely spoken aloud, is that men admire the emotional steadiness that experience tends to bring. There is a stage in emotional development, and again, not every person reaches it at the same age. And not every older woman has reached it at all, where a person stops being at the mercy of every emotional weather pattern, where feeling something deeply does not mean being capsized by it, where a difficult conversation can be had without it becoming a catastrophe, where disappointment can be held, processed, and moved through rather than exploded outward or collapsed inward. This steadiness, this emotional groundedness, is something men respond to with a depth of gratitude and respect that they almost never manage to put into words, because the absence of it has cost them so much. Because so many of their most painful relationship experiences have been defined by emotional reactivity, their own and others, and the relief of being with a woman who can hold herself in a storm is indescribable. They describe it, if they describe it at all, with words like peaceful or easy, or I can just be myself around her. What they are actually describing is emotional safety. And it is not a coincidence that emotional safety is most reliably found in women who have lived long enough and reflected deeply enough to have developed it. The fourth, privately held admiration, and this one is particularly layered, is for the way older women experience their own bodies. This may surprise you. The culture tells an insistent, repetitive story about male preference for youth and physical perfection, and this story has been told so many times and so loudly that many people, men and women both, have stopped questioning whether it is actually true. Here is what is actually true. Men are attracted to confidence in a body. Men are attracted to a woman who inhabits her physical self with ease and ownership. Men are drawn to a woman who moves through the world as if her body is her home, not a project to be perpetually improved or a liability to be constantly apologized for. Many older women, not all, but many, and with increasing frequency, have made some version of their peace with their physical self. Not necessarily loving everything, not necessarily exempt from the moments of dissatisfaction that come to everyone, but no longer organized around the pursuit of a physical ideal at the expense of living. They have stopped waiting to feel worthy until they reach a certain number on a scale, a certain size in a label, a certain reflection in a mirror. They have stepped, however imperfectly, into the fullness of the body they have. And men, the kind of men worth having, the kind of men who are paying real attention, find this profoundly, disorientingly attractive, not because they do not notice the body, they notice the body, but what they notice, layered beneath the physical, is the relationship a woman has with her own body. And a woman who has made peace with hers is a woman who inhabits a different world than the one most people live in. The fifth thing that men admire in older women, and perhaps the most secret of all, is this. They admire the way older women love, not the early love, not the dizzy, urgent, all-consuming love of youth that burns so hot it leaves nothing intact in its path. The other kind of love, the love that has been tempered by experience and grief and the knowledge that nothing lasts forever, and that has somehow, through all of that, come out on the other side, not less feeling, but more. The love that is not performance. The love that does not need to be witnessed in order to exist. The love that holds steady when things get hard because it has been held steady through hard things before, and it knows that hard things are survivable. Men feel this kind of love differently than they feel the younger kind. It reaches them in different places. It settles in them differently. And they do not have words for why, exactly, except to say that it feels real in a way that is harder to achieve when both people are still figuring out who they are. They will not say this. They will not say most of this, but they feel it and they carry it. And sometimes, in their most unguarded moments, before the defense mechanisms click back into place, it changes them. Part 3. The conversations men have with themselves. Now let us go somewhere more uncomfortable. Let us go into the conversations men have with themselves when they find themselves drawn to an older woman, the internal back and forth, the negotiations, the conflicts between what they feel and what they have been told to feel. Because it is not simply a matter of men secretly admiring older women and quietly going on with their lives. It is more complicated than that. There are conversations happening inside men, long, circling, returning conversations that shape how they behave and what they ultimately allow themselves to pursue. The first conversation sounds something like this. Is this what I am supposed to want? Men are not exempt from the cultural programming that tells them what desirability looks like, what the correct object of attraction is, what the approved timeline for relationships should be. They absorb this programming from childhood, from film and television and advertising and the conversations of other men, and it sits in them, often unexamined, for years. So when a man finds himself genuinely, deeply, repeatedly drawn to a woman who does not fit the approved template, who is older, who carries her years visibly, who does not perform the specific kind of femininity that the culture endorses, he can find himself in a kind of internal conflict that he has no practice resolving. He feels what he feels, but he also carries what he has been told. And for many men, the gap between feeling and permission is where so much confusion and so much loss occurs. He will ask himself, is this real or is it just some phase? Is there something off about me for feeling this? What will my friends say? What will my family say? Is there a future in this? Or am I setting myself up for something that the world will not support? These are not small questions, and they are not questions he can easily take to anyone, because the social frameworks for answering them are sparse and often hostile. The culture does not have a warm, affirming narrative for the man who falls for a significantly older woman. It has jokes, it has skepticism, it has the assumption that something is wrong, either with him or with her or with the whole picture. And so he circles, and so he hesitates. And so he sometimes does things that look, from the outside, like disinterest or coldness or games, when what is actually happening is that he is mid-conversation with himself, trying to figure out what he is allowed to want. The second conversation is about his own adequacy. This one is deep and largely hidden, and it is one of the most important things to understand about how men process attraction to older women. Men have egos. This is not a newsflash. But what is less often discussed is the specific way that ego intersects with the experience of being drawn to a woman who is, in many obvious and measurable ways, further along than he is, more experienced, more settled, more certain of herself, more comfortable in her own skin, quite possibly more financially stable, more professionally established, more emotionally developed. There is a part of a man, a part that may be quite young, that may be tied to early experiences of having to prove himself, of earning his worth, of being the one who knows things and has things and leads, that reacts to all of this with something that is not comfortable. Not because he does not respect these qualities, he does, but because next to them he is suddenly and uncomfortably aware of where he is not yet. He is aware that she has navigated things he has not navigated, that she has survived things he has not survived, that she carries a kind of authority that comes from experience, not performance, and that he cannot simply assert his way into having it. And this awareness creates a quiet question: am I enough for her? Not in the simple way, not just romantically, but in every way. Am I interesting enough, developed enough, stable enough, real enough to hold the attention and the respect of a woman who has already been through so much and come out the other side? This question lives in men who are drawn to older women with a persistence and an urgency that they almost never speak aloud. Because speaking it aloud would require admitting a vulnerability, the fear of inadequacy that most men have been trained from childhood to suppress with considerable force. And so, instead of asking the question out loud, they act in ways that try to answer it indirectly. They may try to impress, they may try to demonstrate. They may pull back when they feel most uncertain, creating distance in order to avoid being seen in their uncertainty. They may compete rather than connect. They may lead with bravado when what they actually feel is something much softer and more genuine. The woman in front of them, the older woman with her settled sense of self, may watch all of this with a kind of amused, gentle recognition. She has seen this before. She knows what it is. And often, she is more patient with it than it deserves. The third conversation is about what he wants versus what he thinks he is supposed to want. There is often, in the honest depths of a man's private thinking, a stark and sometimes painful distance between these two things. What he wants, if he allows himself to really feel it without the overlay of cultural instruction, might be simple and clear and certain. He wants the woman who made him feel alive in a room before he even spoke to her. He wants the woman who looked at him like she could see straight through the performance to whatever was underneath it, and who seemed neither threatened by what she found nor eager to exploit it. He wants the woman with the laugh that came from something real and not from wanting to seem like the kind of woman who laughs easily. He wants the woman whose conversation made him feel more intelligent just by proximity, who pushed back without pushing him away, who disagreed with clarity and without drama, who told him something true in a way that landed in him rather than bouncing off. He wants, if he is honest, a woman who is not impressed by the things that other people are impressed by. A woman who has been around long enough to know the difference between substance and performance, and who chooses substance every time without apology. But what he thinks he is supposed to want is often something different, something younger, something more certain in its cultural approval, something that will not raise eyebrows or invite commentary, something safe. And navigating the gap between these two things, the real wanting and the approved wanting, is one of the deepest, most rarely articulated struggles in the private life of a man who finds himself genuinely moved by an older woman. Part 4. The fears they carry. Now we need to talk about fear, because fear is one of the most significant drivers of male behavior in this territory, and it is almost never acknowledged directly. Men who are drawn to older women carry specific fears that shape their behavior in ways that can be confusing and even hurtful to the women on the receiving end. Understanding these fears will not necessarily excuse the behaviors they produce, but understanding them can go a very long way toward making sense of what otherwise seems senseless and toward making decisions about what you want to invest in and what you do not. The first fear is the fear of being laughed at. Men care about how they appear to other men. This is not vanity in the simple sense. It is something deeper, something tied to belonging and status and the tribal logic that governs male social life. To be laughed at by other men, to be the object of ridicule or disrespect, is one of the social experiences that men are most organized to avoid. And in many male social environments, interest in an older woman is, at minimum, unexpected and, at worst, actively mocked. The jokes are predictable. The commentary is predictable. The implications that something is wrong with him, that he cannot get someone younger, that he is somehow lacking in the qualities that would attract the culturally approved option are predictable. A man who knows this, who has watched it happen to other men in his social circle, who has perhaps made these jokes himself, now faces the prospect of becoming the subject of them, and that prospect is not small. It can be genuinely deterring, not because he does not feel what he feels, but because the social cost of following what he feels is more than he is currently willing to pay. This fear often produces a behavior that looks, from the outside, like inexplicable withdrawal or secrecy. A man who is warm and present in private but who does not include a woman in his public life, who does not introduce her to friends, who seems to be managing two separate realities. This behavior is not a reflection of the woman's worth. It is a reflection of the man's relationship with his own fear. The second fear is more personal and more painful. The fear of not being enough. We touched on this earlier in the context of adequacy, but it deserves its own dedicated space because it is so pervasive and so deeply felt. When a man is with a woman who is older, more experienced, more settled, a woman who has already navigated enough life to have genuine wisdom, who has standards forged in real experience rather than theory, who knows what she wants because she has spent time discovering it the hard way, he can feel a specific and particular kind of pressure that he is not accustomed to feeling. The pressure is this: to be real, to be genuine, to be enough as he actually is, not as he might eventually become. This is terrifying for a significant portion of men, particularly those who have built their sense of self primarily around potential, around what they might do, might achieve, might become. They are comfortable being the person who is working towards something, who is becoming something, who is impressive in the future tense. They are less comfortable being simply and plainly who they are right now, in this moment, with all of the gaps and uncertainties and incompleteness that implies. Older women, the settled, self-knowing kind, often have a way of seeing through the future tense version of a man straight to the present tense one. And the present tense one may not yet feel ready to be seen that clearly. The fear of being seen and found lacking, not by cruelty, not by judgment, but simply by the clear sight of a woman who has stopped accepting performances as substitutes for persons, can send men into retreat in ways they cannot explain even to themselves. The third fear is perhaps the most honestly human: the fear of loss. Men who have experienced the specific quality of connection that can exist with an older woman, the depth, the honesty, the particular kind of feeling known and accepted that experienced women can offer, carry a profound and often unacknowledged fear of losing it, because they suspect, even as they are experiencing it, that this is rare, that this is not something they will find just anywhere, that this particular person with this particular combination of qualities is not casually replaceable, and that knowledge, the knowledge that something is precious, creates vulnerability, creates the awareness that loss is possible, creates the need to protect oneself from that loss by perhaps not investing too fully, not going too deep, not allowing the connection to matter quite as much as it actually matters. This fear-driven self-protection can be one of the most frustrating experiences for the older woman on the other side of it. She can see the connection. She can feel it. She knows it is real. And she watches a man pull away from something real and wonder what she did wrong, when the truth is that she did nothing wrong at all. She simply became someone that he was afraid to lose. And that fear, paradoxically, drove him to create distance before the loss could happen on its own. The fourth fear is simpler and more practical, but no less significant: the fear of what comes next. Men who are drawn to older women sometimes run a particular calculation in their minds, a calculation about the future, about timelines, about what life looks like 5 or 10 or 20 years down the road. This calculation is sometimes honest and appropriate, a genuine reckoning with what commitment means across an age difference. But it is often less honest and more fear-driven, a use of future uncertainty as a reason to avoid present investment. They think, what does this look like long-term? They think, what happens as time goes on and the differences become more visible? They think, what will people say about us at family events, at social gatherings, in the long run of an actual life lived together? These are not illegitimate questions, but they are often used as excuses to avoid showing up fully in a present that is actually, right now, extraordinarily good. They are ways of choosing hypothetical future problems over actual present connection. And the woman waiting on the other side of these calculations often pays a price for fears that were never really hers to carry. Part 5. What men think about older women's confidence. Let us spend some time here, because this particular aspect of how men think about older women is especially rich and especially underexplored. There is a specific quality of confidence that older women tend to carry, not all of them, and not perfectly, and not without its own complicated relationship to the self-doubt that never entirely disappears, but a quality of confidence that is demonstrably and distinctly different from the confidence available to younger women. It is the confidence of having been tested, not the confidence of having been told you are wonderful, which is pleasant but not particularly deep. Not the confidence of having had a lot of external validation, which feels good in the moment but does not build anything durable. Not the confidence of youth, which is often simply the absence of enough experience to know yet what there is to be afraid of. The confidence of having been tested is different. It comes from having faced difficult things and discovered that you survived them. It comes from having been betrayed and found that you did not stop trusting in everything. You simply became more discerning in where you placed your trust. It comes from having failed at something important and found that failure was not the end, that it was actually, in retrospect, the beginning of something better. It comes from having loved and loved again, and from knowing, therefore, that the capacity for love does not diminish with experience, it deepens. Men respond to this kind of confidence in ways they often cannot explain and rarely try to. They describe it as knowing what she wants. They describe it as not taking any sh×t. They describe it as comfortable in her own skin. These are all approximations of the real thing, which is a woman who has built herself from the inside out rather than from the outside in. A woman who does not need the reflection from someone else's eyes in order to know who she is. And here is what men will almost never say about this, because saying it would require a level of honesty about their own inner experience that most men have not been taught to access. This confidence is calming, not intimidating, though they sometimes call it that. As a defense, calming. It makes the room feel different. It makes the air quality of an interaction change. It creates a space in which a man can, if he chooses, let down his own performance for a moment and breathe. Because the confidence of a woman who knows herself signals something essential to a man's nervous system. You do not have to manage me. You do not have to walk on eggshells around my fragility. You do not have to be responsible for my sense of self. I have that. What I am offering you is an invitation to something real, and what I am asking for in return is the same. This is an extraordinary relief. It is also an extraordinary challenge, because most men have spent most of their relational lives, to varying degrees, managing other people's expectations, other people's moods, other people's fragility. The offer of a relationship in which this is not required is both deeply welcome and deeply disorienting. It requires a kind of reciprocal realness that not every man is ready for. The men who are ready for it, who step into it rather than running from it, will tell you, if they trust you enough to be honest, that it changed something fundamental in how they experience themselves, that they could not have articulated what they were missing until they stopped missing it, that a woman who is fully herself creates space for a man to be fully himself, and that this kind of mutual reality is the rarest and most valuable thing in human connection. But most men will not say this directly. Most men will say it sideways, if at all. They will say she is different. They will say there is something about her. They will say, I do not know. I just feel like I can be myself around her. And you, if you are paying attention, will hear the bigger thing underneath the smaller words. Part 6. The secret language of male respect. We need to talk about respect because it lives in a very specific and often misread place in the dynamics between men and older women. Men respect older women in ways they often do not articulate, ways that are real and significant, but that can look like many other things if you are not reading the signs correctly. They respect them in the way they listen differently, in the way they watch for a reaction before they decide what to say next, in the way they hold themselves slightly differently when a woman who carries real authority is in the room. This is not the respect that is performed. It is not the holding of doors, or the polite compliments, or the social graceries that men deploy in public with varying degrees of sincerity. Those things happen or they do not, and they do not necessarily tell you much. The respect I am talking about is the kind that shows up in small, unperformed moments. The moment when a man is in a group telling a story and he makes it more accurate when he knows she is listening, because something in him wants her to see him as honest rather than as someone who tells good stories. The moment when he asks her a question and then actually waits for the answer, not as a social pause before his next point, but as a genuine pause because he is curious what she thinks. The moment when she says something he disagrees with, and instead of deflecting or dismissing or doing the 1,000 small things men do to avoid losing an argument, he actually considers it. He sits with it. He says, I had not thought of it that way. These are not dramatic moments. They do not announce themselves, but they are the moments in which you can see, if you are watching closely, that a man has moved from treating a woman as someone to impress or manage or navigate toward treating her as someone whose inner reality matters to him, whose perspective has weight in his world. That shift from navigating to genuinely attending is one of the most significant shifts that can happen in a man's behavior, and it happens far more often than it is acknowledged in the presence of older women who have stopped performing and who, by virtue of that, have created the conditions for a different kind of interaction altogether. But there is a complexity here that is important to name. Respect can also produce behavior that looks like avoidance. A man who genuinely respects a woman who finds himself a little awed by her, a little undone by her clarity and her depth and the way she looks at him, may pull back, not because he does not care, but because the weight of caring has become something he needs to find his footing in. The pullback is not rejection. The pullback is recalibration. It is a man trying to get his bearings in an experience that has rearranged him slightly. This is not an excuse for prolonged withdrawal or ambiguity. It is not a reason to wait indefinitely or to accept treatment that does not honor you. But it is a context that, when understood, changes the reading of what is happening. The man who respects you deeply may, paradoxically and frustratingly, be less consistently present than the man who is simply running a script, because real respect produces real feeling. Real feeling produces real vulnerability, and real vulnerability, for most men, is uncomfortable in a way that scripted performance is not. The woman who can hold space for this complexity, who can see it clearly without being moved around by it, who can wait with patience but not with indefinite tolerance, who can name what she sees without turning it into a drama, that woman has a kind of power in her relationships that most people never access. Part 7. What they say in private. Now we are going to go somewhere that is rarely examined directly, the things men say about older women when the older women are not present. The things they say to their friends, to their brothers, to their trusted circles when they think no one who would be affected by it is listening. I want to be clear here. There are men whose private conversations about older women are unkind, reductive, or simply repeating the cultural stories without examination. These conversations happen. They are not the whole story. And the men who have them exclusively without any complexity or depth are not the men worth organizing your life around. But there are also other conversations, ones that happen with less frequency and with greater vulnerability, often late in the night when people are past the performance of daylight, that sound quite different. In these conversations, men say things like this: "She is the most interesting person I have met in years, and I do not know what to do with that. I feel like she actually sees me, like she is not looking at me the way everyone else looks at me, like she is looking at something I did not know was there. I do not know how to be around her without feeling like I need to be more honest than I usually am. Like something about her makes the usual stuff seem stupid. I think about her differently than I think about other people. It is hard to explain. It is like she is more real somehow. I am scared of how much I want to get it right with her. Like I actually care what she thinks of me. Not the surface me, the real me. She called me out on something once, and I wanted to be angry, and I could not because she was completely right, and she said it in a way that was not cruel at all, and I have been thinking about it ever since. She does not need anything from me the way people usually do. It is like she is offering something freely rather than presenting a deficit I am supposed to fill. I do not know what to do with that. These conversations happen, not as often as they should, not openly enough, but they happen, and they reveal something important, that beneath the cultural noise, beneath the performance and the programming and the rehearsed responses, men are capable of responding to older women with a depth of appreciation and a degree of genuine emotional intelligence that they hide, most of the time, very carefully. What they need, what creates the conditions for the hidden response to become a visible one, is a woman who does not flinch, who does not perform, who is too settled in herself to be moved around by a man's management strategies, and who, by that very quality, makes it safe enough to finally say the real thing. Part 8. The double standard and what lives beneath it. We cannot have this conversation without addressing something that lives at its very center: the cultural double standard around aging in men and women, and what men actually think about it when they are being honest. The double standard is well documented and deeply ingrained. Men who age are distinguished. Women who age are past their prime. Men's gray hair is silver. Women's gray hair is something to be corrected. Men's experience translates into authority. Women's experience translates into becoming invisible. This is the public story. This is what the culture has been telling in 10,000 different ways for a very long time. But here is what often gets lost in the conversation about this double standard. Most individual men, when given the space to reflect honestly, are not particularly invested in it. The double standard is not primarily a system maintained by individual men in their private hearts. It is a system maintained by culture, by collective agreements that no single person originated and that most people have simply inherited without examination. The individual man sitting across from you has, very likely, absorbed some version of this cultural programming, but he has also, if he has done any real living, encountered moments that broke the programming, moments in which he found himself undeniably and unexpectedly moved by a woman who did not fit the cultural template. Moments that told him, in a language louder than culture, that the template was incomplete. And what he often carries once those moments have happened is a kind of quiet unease about the double standard that he does not know how to voice. He is not sure he has permission to reject it outright. His social group may enforce it, the culture certainly enforces it, but something in him, something that responded to a real woman in a real room with a real feeling, keeps pulling against the official position. This is not a comfortable place to live. Holding a private truth that contradicts the public story is not comfortable for anyone. And so many men manage this discomfort by holding both things simultaneously: the cultural position in public spaces and the private truth in the quieter rooms of their inner experience, and hoping they will not be required to choose between them. What makes a man choose the private truth? What makes a man step away from the cultural position and toward the reality of his own experience? Almost always, it is a woman. Not a woman who argued him out of the double standard argument. Rarely changes this kind of thing. But a woman who simply was herself so fully and so openly that the programming could not hold up against the reality. A woman who made the cultural template feel obviously, plainly, embarrassingly insufficient by comparison with the actual living, breathing person in front of him. This is, again, one of the deep powers of older women who know themselves. They do not argue with the double standard. They do not need to. They simply walk into the room, and the double standard reveals its own inadequacy by encountering something it cannot contain. Part 9. The things that make men stay. Let us shift now from what men experience in the presence of older women to what makes them not just feel it but do something with it. What makes them stay? What makes them invest? What makes them choose depth over comfort and reality over performance? The first thing that makes men stay is feeling genuinely seen, not flattered, not managed, not impressed with a performance of who they are trying to be, but seen with the kind of clear, patient, non-judgmental attention that says, "I see who you actually are, not just who you are performing for me, and I am not leaving." This experience of being genuinely seen by another person is one of the most extraordinary and most rare of human experiences. It does not happen often. Most of our relationships, to varying degrees, are organized around managing each other's perceptions. We show the parts we think will be approved of. We hide the parts we are uncertain about. We present, and the other person does the same, and we call that connection, even when it is more accurately a negotiation between two curated versions of ourselves. Older women, who have often made their peace with their own complexity and who have stopped needing to curate themselves for approval, have a particular gift for seeing other people the same way, without the pressure of their own self-protection distorting the lens. They can look at a man and see him, not the social figure, not the performance, not the what does he represent, but the actual person. And the actual person, upon being seen this way, often does not want to leave, has to stop himself from going further in, actually, because it is terrifying and wonderful simultaneously to be seen clearly by someone who chooses to stay. The second thing that makes men stay is intellectual stimulation that comes with lived texture. A brilliant 25-year-old can dazzle a man intellectually. She can bring ideas and perspectives and arguments that are exciting and new and worth engaging with. That is real, and it is not nothing. But there is a quality of intellectual engagement that comes specifically from a woman who has been thinking deeply about things for many years, who has tested her ideas against reality and allowed reality to refine them, who has changed her mind about important things and knows both what changed it and what it was like before it changed, who has opinions forged from experience and not just from reading that has a different texture entirely. It is not just ideas, it is ideas in relationship with a life, and that relationship gives ideas a weight and a resonance that is hard to replicate in any other way. Men who are drawn to this kind of intellectual engagement, who value not just the conclusion, but the living texture of how someone arrived at it, find older women disproportionately compelling in exactly this way. The conversation does not feel like an exchange of positions. It feels like a shared inquiry, like two people actually trying to figure something out together, rather than trying to win. Men who have had this experience often describe it as the best conversation they have ever had. And when the conversation comes from someone they are also emotionally and physically drawn to, the combination is something they do not easily forget or replace. The third thing that makes men stay, and this is perhaps the most underestimated of all, is that older women are often more themselves in their physical presence, more embodied, more at home in the reality of a body. There is a quality of physical presence of ease in one's own skin, of being fully in a body, rather than constantly monitoring and managing a body, that creates a very different kind of intimacy than the alternative. When a woman is not using physical intimacy to manage how she is perceived, when she is not performing vulnerability rather than actually being vulnerable, when she is present in her body rather than slightly outside of it, watching how she is coming across, the experience of closeness becomes something categorically different. Men feel this difference. They may not be able to articulate it. They will say things like, "She is comfortable with herself," or "There is nothing forced about her," but what they are pointing at is a woman who is actually there, who is physically and emotionally present rather than managing a presentation of presence. This quality of genuine presence, which tends to develop with age and with the kind of self-work that age makes possible, creates the conditions for real intimacy rather than performed intimacy. And real intimacy, once experienced, is one of the things that makes a man not want to leave. The fourth thing that makes men stay is simpler and perhaps the most honest. They stay because she makes them want to be better without making them feel like they are not enough as they are. This is a very specific and very rare balance. There are women who inspire improvement by making a man feel inadequate. This is not inspiration, it is pressure, and it is corrosive. There are women who affirm a man so completely that he has no incentive to grow. This is not care, it is comfort, and it stunts. And then there are women, the rare ones, the ones who know themselves well enough to hold both things at once, who see a man clearly and love what they see, and who, by virtue of that loving clarity, make him want to be worthy of it. Not because he is told he is not worthy, not because she is withholding her regard until he proves himself, but because being in her orbit makes him aspire to the fullness of who he could be. This is the quality that older women who have done their own work, who have become settled in their own selves, who have stopped looking for a project and started being fully themselves, this is what they carry. And it is more rare and more powerful than anything the culture has ever told you to compete for. Part 10. The unsaid appreciation. We have covered fear, admiration, private conversations, and what makes men stay. Now let us spend a moment with something that runs beneath all of it, like a quiet current, the appreciation men carry for older women that almost never makes it to the surface. The unsaid appreciation. Men appreciate, though rarely articulate, the specific grace that older women bring to difficulty. When something hard happens, a conflict, a disappointment, a crisis, there is often a visible difference in how an older woman who has done her own work navigates it. Not that she feels less, she may feel every bit as much, but she has enough experience of difficult things to know that difficult things are navigable. She does not catastrophize. She does not collapse the entire edifice of the relationship over a single hard moment. She can hold a problem as a problem rather than as an existential threat. Men who have been with women who do not have this capacity, who have experienced the particular exhaustion of having every difficulty amplified beyond its actual scale, carry a deep and largely unspoken appreciation for the woman who knows how to hold hard things without shattering under them. It is a relief so significant that it can reshape what a man thinks he needs in a relationship. Men also carry, largely unspoken, a profound appreciation for older women's directness, for the fact that they have, in so many cases, simply stopped playing games, stopped hinting, stopped hoping a man will pick up on something without being told, started saying, "This is what I need, this is what does not work for me, this is where I am," not as a demand or an ultimatum, just as information, just as truth. Men do not always love receiving this directness in the moment. But in retrospect, when they think about the relationship, when they compare it to other experiences, they come to understand that the directness was a gift. that it saved them enormous amounts of wasted time and energy, that it treated them as an adult capable of handling honest information rather than a child who needed to be managed around the truth. They appreciate, though they may never say so, the way older women hold space for their complexity. Many men, particularly men who have done some of their own interior work, feel that the world requires them to be considerably simpler than they actually are, to be more certain, more decisive, more emotionally uncomplicated. They receive very little permission to be uncertain, to not know, to feel multiple conflicting things at once, and sit with the conflict rather than resolving it prematurely. Older women who are comfortable with complexity, their own and others, create a kind of space that most men have never experienced before. A space in which it is possible to say, "I do not know. I am working on it. This is hard for me and I cannot quite explain why." And to be met with something that is not impatience or disappointment, but genuine curiosity, genuine willingness to be in the uncertainty alongside, rather than having all the uncertainty resolved immediately. This is a gift that men carry in themselves, often wordlessly, often without having language for it or even fully understanding what they have received. But it is real, and it is part of why, once a man has had the experience of a relationship with an older woman who knows herself, going back to something less than that can feel not just disappointing but genuinely insufficient. Part 11. What men learn from older women that they almost never credit. There is something important that almost never makes it into the cultural conversation about older women and men. The degree to which men are changed by these women. The degree to which the relationships, however they end, however long they last, however complicated they become, leave men different than they were before. Men learn from older women. Not always gracefully, not always with acknowledgement, not always with the credit that the older woman is owed. But they learn. And what they learn stays with them in ways that shape their future relationships, their understanding of themselves, and their capacity for real connection. They learn what it is to be truly listened to, because older women who know themselves often listen differently than the people most men have known before. They listen without immediately preparing their response. They listen with attention that is not assessing threat or looking for opportunity, but simply taking in what is being said. And this kind of listening, which sounds like a small thing and is actually an enormous thing, teaches a man what it feels like to be genuinely attended to. And that experience changes what he is able to settle for afterward. They learn the difference between being told what they want to hear and being told the truth. Not all older women do this. It is not automatic with age, but the ones who have done their own work have largely stopped telling comfortable lies in place of useful truths. And being in relationship with a woman who tells you the truth, who values your growth and your well-being more than your momentary comfort, teaches a man something invaluable about what care actually looks like. They learn about their own patterns. Older women who are psychologically aware tend to see patterns clearly in themselves and in the men they are with. They may name things that a man has never heard named. They may point at dynamics that he has lived in without ever having them made visible. And this naming, done with compassion rather than judgment, can be among the most significant mirrors a person ever encounters. Many men look back on a relationship with an older woman and credit her with giving them the first real understanding of how they move in relationships, what they repeat, what they avoid, where they shut down, where they are capable of opening. They learn, perhaps most significantly, what it is to be with someone who is fully themselves. And that experience of being with a person who is not performing, not managing, not editing, but simply being shows a man what is possible. It raises the bar. It shifts the baseline. It makes him incapable of fully satisfying himself with less, even when less would be easier, even when the world offers it to him readily. This is both a gift and a difficulty, because once you have been with someone who is fully themselves, going back to performances is a kind of diminishment that is hard to tolerate. And carrying that awareness, the awareness of what is possible, is both a richer life and a more demanding one. Part 12. The myth of what men want. Let us spend some time here debunking a story that has been told so consistently and so forcefully that many people have stopped questioning it. The story is this: men want youth above all else. Men are biologically programmed to seek the youngest possible mate. The preferences of individual men, no matter how clear or how genuine, are mere deviations from a biological norm that reasserts itself eventually. And therefore, older women are inevitably and always playing against the odds in the game of male attraction. This story has elements of truth in it, which is what makes it effective as a myth. There are evolutionary pressures that influence attraction. There are statistical tendencies that can be observed in population-level data. These things are real and they are worth understanding, but they are also profoundly and importantly incomplete as descriptions of what any individual man, in the rich and complex reality of his own inner life, actually experiences. Because men are not averages, they are persons, and persons have the remarkable and entirely unremarkable human quality of not always behaving according to statistical tendency. They fall in love with the wrong person on the wrong timeline in the wrong context, and they do it over and over again throughout human history, and they will go on doing it long after the evolutionary psychologists have finished writing their papers about what they should be doing instead. Men want what is real. Men want what moves them. Men want what makes the world feel more alive rather than less, what makes them feel more themselves rather than performing a version of themselves, what connects to something in them that exists beneath the social scripts and the cultural programming. And those things, the reality, the movement, the aliveness, are not located exclusively or primarily in youth. They are located in personhood, in selfhood, in the quality of someone's presence and their willingness to be truly in it. The myth is useful to people who benefit from older women believing they have less to offer than they do. It is not a particularly useful description of what actually happens in the private hearts and minds of the men these women encounter. What actually happens is this: men meet women who move them, who challenge them, who make them better, who make the world more interesting by existing in it, and those women, far more often than the myth would have us believe, are women who carry the particular gifts of experience and self-knowledge and the particular confidence that comes from having survived their own stories. Part 13. The turning points. There are moments in a man's experience with an older woman that serve as turning points, moments that decide whether he moves towards something real or retreats back into the easier and more familiar territory. The first turning point is often the moment of genuine vulnerability. At some point in the dynamic between a man and an older woman who is fully herself, something will happen that requires the man to show something real: a fear, an uncertainty, a failure, a confession of not knowing, a moment in which the performance options run out and the only path forward is through honesty. What happens at this moment depends almost entirely on how the woman receives what is offered. If she receives it with judgment, if she uses the vulnerability against him in that moment or later, if she treats the raw thing as evidence of inadequacy rather than as the offering of trust that it is, the door closes. Not just for this specific offering, but for any future ones. Men who have been vulnerable and found it used against them become extraordinarily careful about when and with whom they open again. But if she receives it with the steady, uncondescending, genuinely caring attention that says, "I see this. I am not frightened by this. I am not going to make you regret this. I am actually glad you told me," then something shifts. Something in the man's experience of the relationship changes. The performance, which was always costly and always limited, becomes somewhat less necessary. The space to be an actual person, rather than a managed presentation of one, opens slightly. And men who discover this space, who find that they can be real and that being real does not result in loss, tend to want more of it, tend to move toward rather than away. The second turning point is the moment when the man sees the older woman handle something difficult with grace. This can be anything: a conflict handled without cruelty, a disappointment absorbed without collapse, a moment of uncertainty navigated with honesty and without drama, a difficult truth delivered with care and without apology, a boundary held with warmth and without resentment. These moments do something specific in the male mind. They build a kind of trust that is very difficult to build any other way. They demonstrate in real time and in real life that this woman knows how to be in difficult moments, that she is not going to create catastrophe out of friction, that being with her through hard things is not going to be more costly than the hard things themselves. For men who have had relationship experiences defined by this kind of difficulty, by conflict that escalated without resolution, by pain that was amplified rather than navigated, by the feeling of being unable to win or breathe or simply be seeing a woman handle difficulty with grace is genuinely transformative. It reorganizes something in his expectations. It makes something he thought was exceptional feel astonishingly possible. The third turning point is the moment when the man realizes he does not want to lose her. This sounds obvious, but it is not, actually, a moment that men experience predictably or smoothly. Often it arrives unexpectedly, in a mundane moment when she says something that makes him laugh from somewhere real, or when she notices something about him that he thought he had hidden, or when she is upset and handles her upset in a way that makes him more, not less, want to be near her. And in this moment, the calculation changes. The weighing of risk and benefit, of what is comfortable versus what is real, of what the culture approves versus what he actually feels, the equation shifts. Because suddenly, the cost of not pursuing this is visible in a way it was not before. Suddenly, the hypothetical loss is not abstract. It is specific and particular, and his chest does something recognizable and unwelcome at the thought of it. This is the moment when men either step forward or find a reason to retreat, and the reason they retreat, if they retreat, is almost always fear. The fear of inadequacy, the fear of social judgment, the fear of the vulnerability involved in choosing something that means something. The woman who can hold this moment, who can see a man at this turning point and offer neither pressure nor indifference, but simply the clear and patient presence of someone who knows what she is worth and is willing to wait for a man to catch up to the reality of what is in front of him, that woman has a particular and profound kind of power. Not a manipulative power, not a power over, a power from, the power of someone who is fully herself, who is not available to be diminished or hurried or made small by anyone's indecision. And that power, more than anything else, is what eventually makes the men who are capable of it step toward rather than away. Part 14. What older women deserve to hear. We have spent a lot of time exploring the interior landscape of men, their private thoughts, their hidden fears, their unspoken admiration. Now I want to turn toward you directly, and I want to say some things that perhaps you have not heard often enough or clearly enough. You are not too old. I want you to hear that not as consolation but as reality, not as a well-meaning attempt to make you feel better about something that has been framed as a problem, as a factual, grounded, evidenced assessment of what you actually are and what you actually carry. You are not too old. You are not past anything. You are not a lesser version of something that was better before. You are precisely who you are, accumulated, textured, experienced, tested, real, and that is not a diminishment of value, it is the fullness of it. The things you carry, the knowledge of yourself, the experience of having lived, the particular kind of care that comes from having lost things and found that you survived the losing, the confidence that is not performance but foundation. These things are not small. They are not compensatory. They are not the consolation prizes of a game you failed to win while you were young enough to play it. They are the substance. They are the thing itself. They are what makes a person genuinely extraordinary rather than simply young and bright and uncomplicated. The men worth knowing, the men who have done enough of their own work to recognize what they are in the presence of, they feel this. They may not say it. They may not have the language for it. They may carry it in a private and wordless chamber of their experience that they do not know how to open, but they feel it. And the ones who run? They run because what you carry is too real for where they are right now, not because it is not enough, because it is more than they know what to do with in this moment. Because standing in the presence of a woman who is fully herself requires a man to be fully himself in return, and not every man is ready for that yet. The man who runs is not a verdict on you. He is a report on himself, and it is a report worth reading clearly and without drama, and then allowing him to move in whatever direction he needs to move while you continue, without apology, in yours. You deserve to be seen, fully seen, not the curated version, not the managed version, not the version that has been edited down for palatability. The whole and complex and lived-in version of you. You deserve to be heard, with the kind of attention that does not immediately redirect toward its own concerns, that does not hear your words through the filter of what it wants them to mean, that simply sits with what you are actually saying and lets it arrive. You deserve to be wanted for what you actually are, not despite your age, not in spite of your experience, not with an asterisk and a set of qualifications, for what you actually are, for the specific, particular, unrepeatable person you have become through all of it. You deserve a love that has enough depth to hold all of you, not a love that selects the comfortable parts and politely avoids the rest. A love that is wide enough and deep enough and real enough to hold the entire, complicated, extraordinary thing that you are. That love exists. It is not wishful thinking. It is not a fairy tale. It is the thing that happens when two people who have done enough of their own work encounter each other in a moment when they are both open enough to actually receive what is being offered. It is available to you, not as something you earn or perform your way into, as something you allow by being yourself so fully and so consistently that the people who are not right for that clarity move through rather than staying, and the people who are right for it recognize in it something they have been looking for, in one form or another, all their lives. Part 15. The deeper truth about attraction and age. Let us come, now, toward the deeper truth that sits at the center of everything we have explored today. Attraction is not primarily about age. This is a sentence that will seem obvious to some and countercultural to others, and both reactions are worth examining. It seems obvious because, of course, the people in your life who have moved you most deeply, who have occupied real and significant space in your heart, who have reached into you and touched something real, these people have moved you for reasons that are not primarily about their age. They have moved you because of who they are, because of the specific and irreplaceable combination of qualities that makes them themselves, because of the way they see you, the way they speak, the way they hold their particular and unrepeatable inner life. But it seems countercultural because the public story, the advertising, the media, the pervasive cultural narrative insists that age is a primary determinant of desirability, particularly for women, and that the appropriate response to aging is strategic management rather than wholehearted living. This story is wrong, not incorrect in some technical or statistical sense. There are elements of truth within it, as there always are in effective myths, but wrong in the sense that matters. Wrong about what moves people, what creates genuine connection, what makes a relationship worth having and worth keeping. What moves people is reality. What creates genuine connection is the meeting of two people who are actually themselves, who are showing up as the full and complex persons they are, rather than as managed presentations of persons. What makes a relationship worth having and worth keeping is not the youth or the beauty or the cultural approval of either person, but the quality of what happens when two people are genuinely together. And genuine togetherness, the real thing, The kind that reaches into the parts of a person they do not usually let anyone touch, is most available when both people have enough experience of themselves, enough settled understanding of who they are and what they need and what they will not accept to bring something real to the encounter. Older women, who have lived enough life to have arrived at some version of this settled self-knowledge, carry an extraordinary capacity for genuine togetherness, not because they are older as a category, because of what the living has made possible, if they have chosen to receive it rather than resist it. The self-knowledge, the honesty, the comfort with complexity, the ability to hold themselves in hard moments, the freedom from the need to perform. These are the qualities that create genuine togetherness. And these are the qualities that men, the ones worth being with, the ones who are doing their own growing rather than simply extracting what is convenient, feel and recognize, and are drawn toward with an intensity that surprises even them. The deeper truth is this: age is not what you think it is, not in the context of love and connection and the genuine meeting of persons. It is not the advantage the culture assigns to youth, and it is not the disadvantage the culture assigns to experience. It is simply a fact, a context, a canvas within which the real variables play out. And the real variables are: who are you? How much of yourself are you willing to show? How deeply are you willing to receive another person? How settled are you in your own worth, your own beauty, your own particular and irreplaceable contribution to the lives of the people you encounter? These are the variables that matter. These are the things that men feel and respond to and carry in the private chambers of their inner experience long after the conversation has moved on. And these are the things you already have, not because you have earned them or performed your way into them, because you have lived them, because you have been willing to go through what the living required and to come out the other side and to still be here, still yourself, still open, still something extraordinary. Part 16. What this means for you. We are moving toward the close of our time together, and I want to make sure that what we have explored today lands somewhere useful for you, not just as information, as something actionable, something that changes, in some way, how you move through the world and the relationships it offers. The first thing I want you to take from today is this: stop reading men's unspoken thoughts as confirmation of your fears. When a man goes quiet, when he becomes inconsistent, when he says things that do not match his behavior, when he is warm in private and distant in public, there are 1,000 readings of this, and the one that is almost never accurate is the one your fear reaches for first. The one that says, "It is because I am too old, too experienced, too much, not enough." Men go quiet for their own reasons. Men are inconsistent because of their own internal conflicts. Men do not always know how to bridge the gap between what they feel and what they are able to say. And almost never, in the real honest working of their inner experience, is the answer to the question of why as simple as the age of the woman in front of them. The second thing I want you to take from today is this: your experience is not a liability. Your years are not a debt. Your history is not a wound that disqualifies you from love. Your experience is one of the most significant things you carry into any encounter with another person. It is what allows you to see clearly, to feel deeply without being overwhelmed, to offer care that has been tested in reality rather than simply theorized. It is what makes you extraordinary in the specific and particular way that only you can be extraordinary. A man who does not understand this, who sees your years as the most relevant fact about you, who reaches past the depth of your personhood to get to the number of your age, is not seeing you. And a man who is not seeing you is not capable of loving you, not because of any failure in him, but simply because love, the real kind, requires sight. And sight requires presence and attention, and the willingness to look at what is actually in front of you. The third thing I want you to take from today: you are allowed to want what you want, not what the culture says women of your age are supposed to want. Not the modest, manageable, appropriately scaled-down version of love that is considered realistic, the full and complete and extraordinary thing that you actually want, in your most honest and unedited self. You are allowed to want a love that sees you, that challenges you, that grows with you, that holds you in the hard moments and celebrates with you in the extraordinary ones. That is honest, that is real, that does not require you to perform or apologize or make yourself small. You are allowed to want this, and you are allowed to hold out for it, not because you are picky or difficult or out of touch with reality, but because you have lived enough life to know the difference between something real and something that merely resembles it. And that knowing is not a problem. It is one of the most valuable things you own. Part 17. A final word on what men will never quite say. Let me close the part of our exploration that is most directly about the interior of men with this. There are things that men who have been with, or who have wished they could have been with, or who have found themselves moved by older women who know themselves will carry for the rest of their lives. They carry the memory of being seen, being actually seen by someone who had enough experience of people to look past the performance and far enough care to look with patience. This is not easily forgotten. It is not easily replaced. They carry the memory of a conversation that felt real, in which both people were actually present, in which the words were the truth rather than approximations of it, in which no one was managing an impression but simply being together in the space of honest exchange. This kind of conversation is rarer than it has any right to be, and once you have had it, you understand what has been missing from all the other conversations. They carry the memory of being challenged in a way that did not feel like an attack, being pushed toward growth not from a place of contempt for where they were, but from a place of genuine belief in where they could go. This is one of the rarest gifts one person can give another, and it leaves a mark that does not fade. They carry, in many cases without having words for it, a kind of gratitude that they would not know how to express, even if they tried. Gratitude for being treated as a full person, for being given both truth and care, for being offered the dignity of honest engagement rather than the comfort of managed distance. These things are what men carry, the things they never quite say, the things that live in the wordless chambers of their experience and shape, in ways they may not fully understand, every relationship that comes after. And knowing this, knowing that this is what you have to offer, that this is what you are capable of, that this is the particular and irreplaceable gift that you carry into every encounter changes everything. It changes how you walk into a room, how you hold yourself in an interaction, how you respond to the things men do and say and do not say, how you make decisions about who is worth your time and who is not, how you understand your own worth in a world that has not always been honest about it. You are not too late, you are not too old, you are not too much. You are exactly what you are, which is to say, extraordinary, lived in, real, and wholly worthy of every good thing that the world of human connection has to offer. We have covered a great deal of ground together today, and I am deeply grateful that you stayed all the way through this with me. If you take nothing else from this video, take this: the story you have been told about your worth, about whether your age diminishes you, about whether the years work against you, about whether experience is liability or gift. That story is not the whole truth. It is not even the most important truth. The most important truth is the one that lives in the real interior of real human experience, in the quiet admiration men carry that they do not have words for, in the moments of genuine connection that reorder a person's understanding of what is possible, in the persistence of real feeling beneath every cultural performance and every social script. You are worth knowing, fully knowing. Not the edited version, not the managed version, not the version that has been made palatable for a culture that has not always known what to do with the fullness of who you are. The full version, the real version, the version that has survived and reflected and grown and arrived here, today, still open, still curious, still extraordinary. Before you go, I have a few important things to ask of you. And I am asking from the heart, if this video moved something in you, if something we explored today landed in a place that needed it, if a single sentence gave you a new way of seeing yourself, or the men in your life, or the dynamics you have been navigating, please give this video a like. It takes 2 seconds, it costs you nothing, and it is one of the most powerful ways you can help this content reach the women who need it most. The algorithm responds to likes, and every like you give is a vote for this kind of deep, honest, woman-centered content to exist and to grow. So please, if this meant something to you, hit the like button right now. Please, leave me a comment. I mean it when I say I read them. Tell me which part of this video hit you the hardest. Tell me what you are navigating in your own emotional life right now. Tell me the question you came here with and whether you found some version of an answer. Tell me about the man in your life who this made you think of. Your words matter to me personally, and they also matter to the other women in this community who read the comments and find in them a reminder that they are not alone in what they are going through. Please share this video. Share it with the woman in your life who has been made to feel invisible by time. Share it with the friend who is questioning her worth. Share it with the woman you love who deserves to hear that what she carries is not less than what she had, it is more. Every share is an act of love for your community and for the broader mission of helping women understand their own worth more deeply and more clearly. And if you have not already subscribed to the Heart Compass, please do that right now. This channel is growing, this community is extraordinary, and every new voice that joins us makes the space richer for everyone. Hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a video. We release new content regularly, and every video is designed to go somewhere real beneath the surface of relationships, love, and the human heart, where the real conversation always lives. Finally, and I say this with genuine gratitude, if the Heart Compass has been meaningful to you, if the content we create here has changed something for you or given you something you did not have before, please consider supporting the channel through Super Thanks. You will find that button right below this video, and every contribution, no matter the size, makes it possible for us to keep doing this work, to keep creating content that treats you as the intelligent, complex, extraordinary woman that you are, to keep going deeper when the world wants to stay shallow. Your support is not just financial, it is a statement that this kind of content matters, that you believe in it, and that you want it to continue. So, if you are moved to do it, please click Super Thanks and know that it means everything to this channel and to me personally. Thank you for being here. Thank you for showing up for yourself in the way that it takes to sit with this kind of content, to let it in, to allow it to challenge and expand and affirm. You are not someone who settles for surface answers to deep questions. That quality, that refusal to settle, is one of the things that makes you remarkable. Come back. We will go deeper next time. This is the Heart Compass, and you exactly as you are always welcome here.